Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'll start with a brief introduction. So my name's Lottie Robinson. I'm Head of IT Product and Delivery at the University of Central Lancashire. Following on from the descriptions from Bella and Sarah, I will say I'm fairly tall and I'll go southern, although I'm gradually moving further north up the country as I get older, I think. So I want to talk today about our journey at the University of Central Lancashire from sort of doing Agile to try and get us to be more Agile. And I'll start with the caveat that we are still very much on that journey. We're by no means sort of in a sort of amazing place, but we are improving what we're doing. So just want to share some sort of learnings and that journey that we've been on. So I've been in this role for 18 months now and counting. Sometimes it feels like much longer, sometimes it feels like about 10 minutes. I've been in working in software delivery sort of mainly from a product perspective for the last 16 years in a range of different businesses. I am brand new to higher education, so a year and a half in, I'm still finding acronyms that I have no idea what they mean, and sometimes no one can explain them either. So I'm still very much learning on this journey, but hopefully bringing some of that experience and from other industries into what we're doing. And my focus has been really on people and trying to improve the ways that we're working to deliver value from that kind of people perspective. And why did I take this role on? I do love a challenge. So that was part of sort of, I remember my interview process was that, that recognition that this was going to be a challenge, but also from my perspective, there was a lot of opportunity to make some really positive change in what we were doing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we started, going back to some of the basics and really what do we actually mean by Agile when we say we are doing Agile, or ideally we're more being Agile. Then we'll talk about some of the foundations that underpin actually getting Agile to work in how we're working, and then just talk about some key takeaways. So hopefully there'll be some useful sort of takeaways there for you. So the starting point, I was told that Agile had been implemented and we were looking to move to a product-oriented operating model. So I started out trying to find out from the teams, what does Agile actually mean to you? Where are we? What were we starting with? I had some expectations. This is what I got. And this is genuine, sort of almost verbatim from some of the post-it note sessions that we had in the first few weeks of me being in the role. So, well, I'll go through some of these, but it should give you an idea of the kind of starting point. So there was a lot of kind of frustration and negativity towards the word kind of Agile and what it was. It was being seen as very bureaucratic, a lot of meetings, lots of people in meetings, not really adding value, dragging things out, teams being told they had to work in a certain way, cutting corners, but then on the other side it's putting up barriers to actually how we're working. Flexibility was probably one of the only positives that did come out of that, so it's giving some flexibility. The teams had gone through some DSDM training and some of them thought, that's it, we're Agile now, great. For those of you who aren't familiar with the DSDM framework, it's quite complex and probably about as close to waterfall as you can get under an Agile umbrella. And one of the comments that I've had and still get from colleagues is, this doesn't work in higher education, we're different. Agile doesn't work, DevOps won't work, you don't know higher education. So we'll come on to that, but that's what I walked into. So some of the observations from that, sort of my initial discovery, Agile was being seen very much as a box-ticking exercise. It was being done to the teams. There were external partners involved in that implementation. There was no real internal ownership of how we were working. Lots of frustration, which was pent up. We had retrospectives with over 20 people in those sessions, and they were wondering why no one was speaking up. It was being used as an excuse for not documenting anything at all. And knowledge was seen as power, and this is quite a historic thing within the organisation. We had a lot of silos of that knowledge, but also it meant there were a lot of single points of failure and risk within that profile. People were sort of clinging on to that knowledge and didn't want to share it. There was a resistance. We didn't have any alignment or any real collaboration between teams. People had implemented Agile in different ways across the teams, and that was producing some challenges, particularly where there were dependencies between what the teams were doing. We had way too much work in progress, and we still do, to be honest, but we're trying to limit that work in progress so that we can actually focus on getting things done before we move on to the next thing, rather than having work go on for months and months without actually delivering that value when it gets into production. We had lots of buzzwords that were not understood really at all. I asked some of the teams what story points were, and fairly consistently got the reply that a story point was a day's worth of work. So really, no one really understood why they were doing what they were doing. There were lots of sort of meetings for the sake of meetings and terminology being used that wasn't necessarily understood. So this was when I thought, right, we need to go back to the basics here and really go back to the fundamentals of Agile and what do we actually mean by it. And Agile is a mindset. It's not a project management methodology. It's not a framework in itself. It's a mindset. Moving away from some of those words, buzzword bingo, if you want to play that game, to actually back to 2001, Agile Manifesto. Hopefully this is familiar to some of you. It might not be to others, but how often do we go back and think about this? What did we actually set out to do? And the Agile Manifesto looks at better ways of developing software. And there's been a recognition now over the last sort of 20 years or so that there's benefits of this outside of just software delivery as well. But the things that we're looking at to value: individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, and responding to change. That's it. That's really fundamentally what we're trying to do. And the last sentence on that slide is really important and sometimes gets forgotten, which is there is still value in the things on the right-hand side of that screen. It's just that we value the items on the left more. So this doesn't mean you don't have to document anything anymore. So for the purposes of today, I'm going to focus on individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And through that, really going back to the basics of what do we actually mean? What are we trying to do here? So taking that manifesto and some of the sort of thinking behind it and that mindset, fundamentally we're trying to solve problems for users and we're trying to deliver value. We need to have clear communication and collaboration in order to do that effectively. We'll do that through iterating. We're going to start small, we're going to learn, we're going to inspect what we're doing, adapt and continually improve. We're going to try and deliver that value through frequent releases, so we're getting that value delivered early. And we want to keep things simple. And I went through this, a similar slide with some colleagues the other day who didn't have a clue what Agile was. And we got to this and they went, well, that's just common sense, isn't it? It's not, and actually when you look at it, yeah, it is. But sometimes we have to, we need to be thinking about it, put it in front of us to actually remind us that this is what we are doing. So we started looking then at actually some of the foundations that underpin these ways of working. So the situation we were in is we had a lot of meetings, ways of working, terminology, tools, processes sat on top of what was effectively crumbling foundations. We didn't have the culture, the trust and the people really and that mindset in place to support all the things on top of it. So it was never going to succeed. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things that we've been trying to work on from that to get the foundations right to allow the rest of the sort of ways of working to succeed and be successful. So We need to create a safe space for people, and that's about creating trust within teams and introducing that concept of psychological safety. So for those of you that haven't come across that before, this is the degree of comfort and security that members of a team or group feel in taking risks, speaking out and failing, and whether they expect to be punished or rejected for doing so, basically. So this is, a lot of it is based on trust and inclusivity, and it takes a while to build within a team, and it's very easily broken. So you could have a high degree of psychological safety within a group of people. You add one other person into that group, and that psychological safety could be broken and needs building up again. So it's specific to that team, but it's so important to nurture that within those groups. Within teams, again, we looked at communication preferences. Do you know the people that we're working with? Do we know how they like to communicate with each other? What motivates them, what doesn't? Are they verbal communicators? Do they prefer communication in writing? Do they feel comfortable in groups of people? Actually, do they need some time to think about a problem before coming to a meeting? So again, it's really understanding the people and how we're interacting and communicating. Understanding the strengths within the team as well. We've all got different strengths, and do your teams know who has which strength within that team, and what can we use and what can we really build on. And every single team is different because it's made up of a different group of people. You could implement Agile within one team and it will be different to another team because the individuals are different and there'll be nuances in how they work most effectively together. We've changed retrospectives. We cancelled a whole load of meetings and retrospectives or reviews or whatever we want to call them are for the team. It's not for managers. That is for the team, and it's a safe space for the team to have those conversations, to discuss what's working, what's not, and how we can improve. That's not for me to go in and say, what have you done wrong this sprint? Or what can we do better? It's for the teams. And we're also trying, and this is a much harder thing to do, to make it safe to fail, to make it safe to try something and fail and understand what those boundaries are. And that's your iterations, really. But in some cases, we are almost paralysed and won't actually do anything until we think we've done all the analysis, we understand all of the impacts, and we understand exactly what that solution's going to look like. But actually, sometimes we just need to do something and just try it and start small and learn and iterate and build on that. The next point is around reframing feedback. So this is really important as well. If we want to continually improve how we're working, how we're delivering that value, we need to get feedback from the teams and from the people involved in doing that work. And this has been quite difficult to actually get people to speak out and speak up. So we've put a lot of work into actively encouraging people to give that feedback, having individual conversations with people about to understand why they may not feel comfortable speaking up, what's holding them back from raising feedback or giving feedback and coming up with ideas in those sessions. And that could be anything from, they don't feel comfortable in the group that they're working within, back to the psychological safety. But it might be where they've raised feedback or provided opinions in the past and have been, shot down or blamed for something, or feel they're going to get in trouble for saying something negative. So we've had to sort of reset a lot in that area. This is about continuous improvement. It's not about blame. It's not about finger pointing of who's done what wrong. This is about, as a team, how can we do things better? It's not personal at all, and that needs to be really clear. It's about the team, and everything needs to be raised constructively, professionally, respectfully. And that's something, again, we've had to work through some sort of historic behaviours as well. And on the flip side, everyone's input needs to be respected. You might not agree with it, but everyone has that view, has that opinion, and that's valid. And we need to understand what those are. Actions are really, really important. This is a bugbear of mine, and my teams will know this. the amount of times you see teams having retrospectives going in, saying, right, what have we done well, what have we not done so well, what could we do better? Come back 2 weeks later and have the same conversation again because nothing's changed. And that's because the actions, we capture them, but we're not doing anything with them. So really, really important that we're trying to embed is that key actions from retrospectives, get them built into the work of the next sprint. Put them in as tasks or however you're managing that work so that we actually know that something is being done, those actions have got owners, and we can then review next time. Did that actually work? What was the outcome of those actions? So we can keep improving. Something else that gets forgotten quite often, and as IT teams, we're quite often at the receiving end of negative comments. This isn't working. Why is this broken? Why has this failed? Why is this system not available? We need to recognise and celebrate and share our successes, however small those might be. But a really important part of that review is recognising what we've done well. That gives the team that satisfaction to say, actually, yes, we have delivered something, and we've solved a particular challenge. But quite often we just forget about this. So this is really, really important to do. Also, where we've got those successes, we can share that best practice and those learnings across teams as well. So this isn't just sort of recognising that within the teams. What can we learn and what can we share to allow other people to sort of benefit from what we've learned. So some of the successes that we've had over the last sort of year or so, retrospectives have really changed. So we've still got, we still have a way to go in some areas, but we're getting people bringing challenges to the table and actually discussing them and getting much more sort of active discussions that are going on, which is really positive. I had someone say to me, I thought I'd be sacked for saying that, or for bringing that feedback because it's negative feedback. Absolutely not. We want to hear it. As long as you're bringing that feedback up in a respectful and constructive way, we absolutely want to hear it. We've really improved the transparency and collaboration with business stakeholders and are really working on getting those stakeholders embedded within the teams. This isn't a kind of us and them IT and business, this is us as a team, and we need to deliver this together. So we've built those relationships a lot. We've introduced pairing and knowledge sharing. So again, in some areas, this has been really, really challenging because people have tried, especially people who have been at the university for 20, 30 years. They want to hold on to that knowledge. So that we have the small wins of actually, we've managed to have half-hour pairing session. That's what we started with. Start really small. Will you agree? He's going to sit down with this person for half an hour. And that was it to start with, and then you build on that. So we've started really small in some areas, but we've got to start somewhere. And we've got knowledge sharing as well being built into sprint goals as well, so that we're actually allowing time for people to share that knowledge so that we can start to mitigate some of that risk of the sort of the silos. What makes me really happy is when someone comes up and says, can we try this? Yeah, absolutely. That's, absolutely. Go and try it, learn something, come back and feedback about what you've learned. Did it work? Did it not? Can we build on that? Can we do more of it? We've recently, from a kind of development perspective, delivered an MVP to production in 3 months. Now, for some of you who may be very more advanced on your agile journeys, you might think, yeah, okay, so what? But actually, from a position where we were taking years to get things into production, having some small wins like this has been, again, just demonstrates that we can do it. And again, it's those small wins that we can keep building on. And the final point, changing the language from I to we within the teams. I need this, or I want to do this. We need it, because we are all trying to achieve a goal together. And that small shift in language can have a really big impact on behaviours within the team. And it is nice to see when people are catching themselves doing that now as well within the teams and going, nope, sorry, not I, we need to do this. and that we will change behaviours by changing that language. And it's such a small shift, such a small change, but it can have a really big impact. So some key takeaways from the last sort of 18 months. Go back to the why. This is around our ways of working, not what we're building and what we're trying to achieve from actually, the solutions we're building, but how we're working. Why are we working in this way, and what are the benefits we're trying to realise from working in a more agile way? One of the real challenges for us has been a lack of agile experience within the teams. So when I started, there were probably myself and probably one or two others who had ever worked in an agile environment, a real sort of successful agile environment or mature agile environment. We're now slowly building up that experience through hires, and also obviously the internal teams now are getting sort of more comfortable with agile, but that's been something which has been really key to make sure you need some people on the ground who really have seen this working in practice. Embrace best practice from outside the sector. This is not new. Businesses have been doing this for 20 plus years, and there's a lot that's been learned along the way. Yes, we do have, particular challenges, and, there's a lot of legacy history within higher education, but we're not that different to a lot of other businesses. So we can definitely learn from outside the sector, as well as, events like this that are really valuable, hearing from others who are in a similar position to us. And we can, share those experiences, but there's a lot to learn from outside the sector as well. Having some guardrails and standardisation were really essential, especially at the beginning. So things like making sure all the teams were starting their sprints on the same day. Having particular meetings or ceremonies, which I've said all of the teams will be, have to do. Over time, the teams will get more of that autonomy to sort of shape exactly how they're working, but especially up front, having some of those guardrails in place is really important, just to allow us to sort of learn in a sort of slightly more controlled way, and have managed dependencies across teams, particularly where we've got resources that are needed between different teams. And then finally, just reiterating the point around looking after the foundations. So we can talk about Scrum, we can talk about Kanban, Lean, Agile, and everything that comes with that as much as we like, but it's fundamentally underpinned by those foundations of the people and the culture, creating that safe space, because it's ultimately about your people, how they communicate with each other, how they interact with each other, and how comfortable they feel in speaking up, sharing their ideas, learning together, failing, learning, iterating, and continually improving. So focus on your foundations and on the people side of it. It's the harder part. It's easy to say we're going to go and have a sprint planning session and we're going to use Jira and we're going to write user stories, but actually putting the work into the people is really important, because without that, it's not going to be a successful way of working, and you're not going to realise those benefits. That's it from me. Thank you all very much. And any questions, I guess?
Well, first of all, round of applause. Thank you. I think that was a kind of masterclass in agile in practice. It's easy to look at the manifesto and think, oh, it's this, and people can be quite evangelical about it. But I think it's good to point out that we value these things on the left, but we still have to follow a plan. We still have to document and things like that. So, yeah, I've got some questions of my own, but open up to the floor first.
That was absolutely fascinating. Just thinking about the knowledge transfer piece, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us are in the same boat where you've got, as you mentioned, members of the team who've got decades of experience in a system, and absolutely tons. They may be of a certain age with an eye on the door. But even if they're not deliberately hoarding that knowledge, it's the sheer scale of the knowledge they've got and how you get that across to someone. how did you go around identifying which areas to start with there if the rest of the team doesn't know what they don't know?
So, I guess then it's if we're embedding it with into everything that we're doing, whatever piece of work is going to, is coming in next, we'll make sure that, can we give that to somebody else to do as the lead and actually use someone else as support and flip it so it's not the person you'd expect to be the lead on that. So we've not particularly, there are certain areas where we said that's a high risk area and we know we need to really unpick that, make sure it's documented and identify other people to sort of share that knowledge with. But it's embedding it into then everything that we're doing so that we can it's a gradual process and it does take time because you say there's a huge amount and there will still be gaps that you don't know until something goes wrong and then you realise you need to know it. But again, if you can rather than people going to the person they've always gone to, direct them to somebody else instead to try and figure out and solve that on their own and then use the other person as sort of a can I just check or, that second line, if you like. So there's different ways of doing that.
Hi there. So we are trying to work agilely, but it's possibly not as agile as it should be. So some of your things kind of resonated with the, frequent releases. We're definitely not releasing as frequently as I would love to get to. But we had a kind of ways of working chat with the team recently where we sat them down and we said that, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't. And too many meetings is what came out of it. We have sprint planning, we have refinements, we have retros, we have daily stand-ups. When do we have the time to actually do the development? Because we spend so much of the day in meetings, when am I going to do the work? Have you found a balance with that?
So, a few things around that. We need to make sure the meetings are valuable and we know why we're having those meetings. Because actually, if the meetings are doing what they should and are productive, then it should make the development work more efficient, more effective, and it should reduce any rework. So if we take refinement, for example, if we're doing that up front and putting the legwork in up front, we're not going to get to the position when 2-3 weeks later someone's developed something and then we actually find out it wasn't, they've gone off on a tangent because there wasn't that shared understanding up front. So I would say every meeting should be valuable, and if it's not valuable, we're not doing it right, or, is it too long? So maybe understand sort of why there is this perception that there are too many meetings. Do we understand exactly what we're trying to get out of those meetings? And if you didn't have those meetings, you'd start to realise some of those challenges. And, stand-ups, what are they there for? Removing blockers as quickly as possible. We don't want to wait a week or 2 weeks for someone to raise their hand and go, I'm stuck on something. It's that daily, drumbeat of, right, how can we unblock you? How can we move this forwards? So they should be allowing us to remove blockers, to develop the right thing, to make sure we've got that clarity up front.
I think that's probably the number one complaint when people move to Agile is too many meetings. But I think often it's just that the meetings have now got a name and they happen regularly. Whereas I think if you actually look at your diaries, people should be in fewer meetings. But it's a common challenge. So I have just in the last minute, I have a question. In terms of the key takeaway, what's been the biggest challenge of getting this turned around, and what would be your sort of one takeaway piece of advice for anyone in a similar situation?
Yes, I think one of the biggest challenges institutionally is, probably twofold. Hierarchy and history have been two real challenges. So as an institution, we're very hierarchical and there's a big emphasis around that, to the extent that, some people won't talk to you if you've not got a particular job title and things like that. So actually, that's very anti-agile. And when you're trying to get people in an environment where they're comfortable speaking out, sharing their views and kind of flattening that structure, that's been quite a challenge to sort of change that mindset. And related to that is history. There's a lot of kind of legacy, knowledge, ways of working, change fatigue, within the teams as well. So that's been something that we've had to sort of try and keep working on, basically.
And they do say that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So no matter how good your strategy is, you need the right culture to deliver that. So thank you, Lottie. That was as I say, a masterclass. So thank you very much.
Thank you.